Assalamu alaikum, my sister, my brother. Sometimes life doesn't just hurt. It tears through everything you thought was secure. The plans you carefully built begin to fall apart. The people you trusted start walking away. The stability you counted on begins to crack. And you feel yourself falling into a space where nothing feels certain anymore. That's the moment many people call the breaking point. The moment where tears are no longer optional. They just come. The moment where sleep doesn't bring rest and smiles don't come naturally. And while the world might see that moment as your end, your downfall, your failure, Allah sees something else. He sees a soul ready for transformation. He sees a heart that is finally open, vulnerable, exposed in a way that can now be purified, reshaped, redirected, and healed through His mercy. You see, when everything is going well, when the people around you are praising you, when your plans are unfolding smoothly, it's easy to forget your dependency on the one who gave you those things in the first place. It's easy to start relying on yourself, to think you have control, to become immersed in this world and begin to forget the fleeting nature of every comfort it contains. But when Allah loves a person, He purifies them. And sometimes that purification begins with the removal of those very things you were clinging to more than Him. Sometimes, in order to pull you closer, He has to let life break you apart. Because once you are broken, once you are empty, once you feel like there's nothing left, then and only then do you begin to see what was really holding you up all along. Your strength wasn't in your bank account. It wasn't in the approval of people. It wasn't in your health, your job, or even your family. It was in Allah. It was always in Allah. But sometimes the heart needs to break in order to rediscover that truth. And when that realization comes, it doesn't feel like defeat anymore. It begins to feel like awakening. The same pain that brought you to your knees becomes the reason you find peace in sujood. The same loss that made you question everything becomes the path that leads you back to Allah's plan. And that's when you begin to understand that brokenness is not a curse, it's a divine beginning. You begin to clean your heart from attachments that were never meant to last. You start rethinking the life you were building. You ask yourself, what am I chasing? Why am I chasing it? What have I forgotten about my Creator while I was running after the creation? And slowly the answers start to come. Not through noise, not through distractions, but through silence, reflection, and remembrance. You see, when you're broken, the dunya's voice starts to fade, and in its place, you start to hear the voice of your soul, that quiet voice that was drowned out by the rush of this world, that voice that says, I was created for something more. I was created to know my Lord. I was created to turn back. Healing doesn't begin when your problems are fixed. It begins when your heart returns. When your eyes begin to see again, not just the surface of things, but the deeper meaning behind them. You realize that what you lost had to be lost, that what was taken was never truly yours, that what was denied was actually a form of protection. And you start to thank Allah even in the midst of pain. You start to feel grateful for the trial, because it brought with it something far more valuable than what it took. It brought you back to your Creator. And that return, that moment of recognition, that spiritual awakening, that is the beginning of true healing. You begin to see your tears not as signs of weakness, but as signs of purification. You begin to understand that crying in sujood is not something to be ashamed of. It is one of the most honored forms of worship. Because when you are at your lowest, but you still call on Allah, you are rising in His sight. You are being elevated, honored, protected, and every drop that falls from your eyes is seen. Every silent plea from your heart is heard. Every pain you carry is known by the one who shaped your heart in the first place. He knows where you've been. He knows where you're going. And He knows exactly what you need in order to get there. And this is the miracle of brokenness. It forces you to stop, to breathe, to reflect, to humble yourself, to rediscover your true purpose, to realize that your journey was never meant to be free of struggle, but that every struggle was meant to bring you back to the one who never left your side, the one who was waiting for you to remember Him, the one who already knew this moment would come, the one who had already prepared your healing before you even felt the pain. And when you surrender to that reality, when you say, Wa Allah, I am broken but I turn to You, that is when the healing truly begins. There are moments in life when your heart cries out for relief, but the situation remains the same. You pray with sincerity, you cry in sujood, you raise your hands in desperation, Yet days pass. Weeks pass. Sometimes even years go by, and the very thing you begged for has still not arrived. That is when the whisper of doubt begins to creep into your mind. The question starts to form quietly within your soul, why hasn't Allah answered me? And this is where the true test of trust begins. Because trusting Allah doesn't just mean believing He can do something, it means believing He will do it at the perfect time. Even if you don't understand that timing while you're in pain. When you're hurting, time feels heavy. A single day can feel like a week. Waiting can feel like a punishment, and silence can feel like abandonment. But Allah is never late. His timing is not measured by the ticking of the clock or the calendar hanging on your wall. His timing is measured by His knowledge, His mercy, and His wisdom. There are things you don't know, realities you can't see, futures you haven't yet walked into, and Allah is protecting you in ways you can't begin to comprehend. Sometimes the delay you're facing is not a denial, it's a preparation. Allah may be preparing your heart for something greater, preparing your circumstances so that when your prayer is answered, it brings you closer to Him, not further away. If the blessing comes too early, it may destroy you. If it comes too easily, you may not appreciate it. But if it comes at just the right time, through just the right path, your heart will recognize the gift and attach itself not to the blessing, but to the one who gave it. The Prophet endured years of struggle, persecution, and hardship. The early believers were tortured and tested in ways we can't imagine. Did that mean Allah wasn't listening? Did it mean their du'as were ignored? No. It meant that their faith was being strengthened. Their hearts were being cleansed. Their trust was being purified. And eventually Allah gave them victory. But that victory came after they proved their reliance. After they held firm through the storm. After they showed that their faith wasn't conditional. It was rooted in yaqeen, in certainty, in tawakkul. When you ask Allah for something, you're not just asking for a result. You're also asking for what's best for your soul. You're asking for what will benefit you not only in this dunya, but also in the akhirah. And Allah responds to that in the most perfect way. Not always with what you want, but with what will carry you toward His mercy and paradise. He knows which doors need to remain closed. He knows which delays are actually divine detours towards something far more beautiful. There is a story unfolding in your life that is written by the one who created you. You see only one page at a time. You see the heartbreak, the disappointment, the rejection, the unanswered prayer. But Allah sees the entire book. He sees the end that you cannot see yet. And in that ending, there are blessings you don't yet understand. There is healing waiting for you. There are victories that will make sense of the losses. And until you reach that chapter, He asks you to trust. Trusting Allah's timing is not about sitting back and doing nothing. It's about continuing to strive, continuing to pray, continuing to knock on the door, even when it hasn't opened yet. It's about believing that the silence is not a rejection, it's a test of your endurance, your sincerity, your faith. It's about understanding that Allah is closer to you than your own thoughts. That He hears the whisper of your heart before your lips form the words. That He sees your patience. He sees your late night du'as. He sees your broken heart still calling out to Him despite not receiving what it asked for. There are times when what you are asking for is noble, pure, and seemingly good. You ask for a righteous spouse, a healthy child, a halal source of income, or simply a way out of difficulty. And even then it doesn't come. You may start to wonder, but isn't this something Allah loves? Why is it still out of reach? The answer lies not in the worth of your request, but in the readiness of your soul to carry it. You might be asking for something that will elevate your dunya, but weaken your deen. You may be praying for ease, while Allah is preparing to strengthen your character through trial. The delay isn't because your request is unworthy. It's because Allah wants to give it to you in the best way, at the best time, or replace it with something better for your akira. Every time you say, Wa Allah, something changes in the unseen. The angels write it down. Your status is elevated, your heart is cleansed. And whether you see it or not, your connection with Allah grows stronger. It's a relationship built not on transactions. I ask, you give, but on trust. Even if you delay, I believe. That level of trust transforms your entire experience of pain. Because the pain doesn't go away, but it becomes purposeful. It becomes a means through which you gain closeness to the most merciful. Sometimes the most powerful act of faith is not in the moment of sujud, but in the moment you wipe away your tears, get up, and continue with your day still believing that Allah heard you. Still believing that your moment will come. Still walking through life with a heart that may be tired, but never stops trusting. That is the trust that Allah loves. That is the trust that lifts you in ways unseen. That is the trust that says, even if I don't see the plan, I know the planner. If you could only see what is being arranged for you in the heavens right now, you would weep from relief. You would stop questioning. You would stop doubting. You would fall into sujud in gratitude. But Allah withholds that vision from you because part of your growth is learning to walk by faith, not by sight. To continue to believe even when the world tells you it's hopeless. To continue to hope even when your heart is weary. Because that hope is not based on fantasy. It is based on divine promise. So every time you feel the pain of delay, remember this: the one who created time is not bound by it. He is never late. He is never unaware. He is never unjust. His promise is true. And His plan for you is more beautiful than anything you could write for yourself. There is a wisdom behind every hardship you endure. There is a reason why the road of life is not always smooth. It is not because Allah has turned away from you. It is not because you are unloved or forgotten. In fact, it may be the exact opposite. Sometimes, the very pain you are experiencing is a sign that Allah loves you enough to cleanse you, to guide you, to bring you back to what matters most before it's too late. That is the nature of hardship. It is not meant to destroy the believer. It is meant to transform him. It is not a punishment when met with patience. It is a purification, a hidden mercy, a divine wake-up call designed not to break your soul, but to strengthen it. When a soul becomes too comfortable in this world, it begins to forget the reality of the next. When blessings come one after the other without pause, the heart can grow heedless. And so, in His mercy, Allah places bumps in your road. He shakes your world, not to cause you harm, but to awaken you from the sleep of attachment to the dunya. You begin to remember that you were not created for this world. That your soul, your heart, your very existence was always meant for something more eternal, more sacred, more pure. And sometimes, the only way for that realization to settle into your bones is through the weight of a trial. Hardship strips you of illusion. It removes the layers you've built around your heart. The pride, the distractions, the arrogance, the sense of self-sufficiency. Because as long as you think you don't need anyone, you'll never turn to the one who gave you everything. But when hardship comes, when life humbles you, when everything you leaned on is taken away, then your heart begins to soften. You begin to see that your strength was never yours. Your wealth, your health, your relationships, your success, they were all gifts. And gifts can be taken. But the giver remains. And it is to Him that you turn in your moment of realization, in your moment of brokenness. And you say, Ya Allah, I was wrong to rely on everything, but you begin to cry in the silence of the night. You begin to raise your hands and do not because it's routine, but because it's necessary. You begin to pray not out of habit, but out of hunger for peace. You begin to read the Quran not because you have to, but because your soul is thirsty. And that is where purification begins. Not just in the removal of sins, but in the revival of your relationship with Allah. Because sometimes the soul becomes sick. It becomes heavy with heedlessness, pride, envy, greed, and false attachments. And Allah, in His infinite kindness, uses hardship as a way to cleanse your heart from these things before they destroy you. Some of the most beloved people to Allah face the most difficult trials. The prophets themselves, each of them were tested in ways we cannot imagine. They faced loss, rejection, isolation, betrayal, hunger, grief, and even attempts on their lives. Not because they were cursed, but because they were chosen. Their hearts were refined through pain. Their patience was perfected through difficulty. Their sincerity was proven not in ease, but in struggle. Because it is easy to say, if I believe, when life is good. But true faith is revealed when everything falls apart and you still say, Alhamdulillah. That is the faith that shines in the darkness. That is the faith that lifts you when nothing else can. Hardships reveal the depth of your faith. They show you who you really are when the masks are removed. They test your resilience, your character, your intentions. They force you to look inward and ask, who am I without all these things I thought defined me? And as you sit in that reflection, as you begin to process the pain, you start to see a new version of yourself emerging. One that is more humble, more patient, more grateful, more God conscious. And that transformation is not possible without the weight of hardship pressing on your soul. When you lose someone you love, you begin to reflect on the temporary nature of life. When you fall ill, you realize how fragile the body is and how much you've taken your health for granted. When you face rejection or loss, you begin to understand that your worth was never tied to people's approval, but to your connection with Allah. These moments strip you down, but they also build you up. They remove the impurities from your heart and bring you back to what is pure, what is real, what is lasting. And that is your relationship with your Creator. There are sins you've committed that only hardship can erase. There are diseases of the heart that only difficulty can heal. There are layers of pride, heedlessness, and laziness that only pain can peel away. And so, when Allah sends you a hardship, He is not harming you. He is refining you. He is polishing your heart so that it may reflect His light more clearly, so that your soul becomes like a clean mirror, free from smudges of dunya and full of His remembrance. And that remembrance, that closeness, that deep reliance is what makes the trial worth every tear. When the soul becomes purified through hardship, even your vision of the world begins to change. You begin to see things not just from the lens of this world, but through the lens of the hereafter. You start to care less about what people think and more about what Allah knows. You stop chasing temporary pleasure and start striving for lasting peace. You detach from the illusions of this life and begin to build a deeper, more meaningful connection with the one who never changes, never leaves, and never forgets. So many people think that happiness lies in comfort. But the truth is, some of your greatest growth will happen in the most uncomfortable moments. It is in those moments that you discover your capacity for sabr. You uncover the power of tawakkul. You learn how to make sincere dua. Not just with your tongue, but with your heart trembling, your soul yearning, your tears flowing. That kind of dua is not possible without the pressure of pain. And that kind of dua is often the one that opens the gates of mercy you never imagined. Your hardship today might be the reason for your elevation tomorrow. It might be the shield that protects you from a greater calamity. It might be the cause of your sins being wiped away. Or it might be the very thing that turns your heart completely back to Allah. Either way, it is not meaningless. It is not random. It is not without reward. The Prophet Sikhu said that no difficulty befalls a believer, not even the prick of a thorn, except that Allah expiates some of his sins through it. So imagine what that means for the deep pain you are carrying now. Imagine how much Allah is loving you, purifying you, preparing you. You may not see the results of that purification today. You may still be in the thick of it. You may still be crying at night, still struggling to breathe through your pain. But trust that something is happening inside of you. Trust that your soul is changing. Trust that Allah is not wasting a single moment of your hardship. He is drawing you closer. He is refining your character. He is making you into someone who will enter Jannah not because life was easy, but because faith remained strong even when it wasn't. This world is temporary. The breath in your lungs is not permanent. The people in your life are not guaranteed. The money in your hand, the job you hold, the home you sleep in, the health you enjoy. All of it is from Allah. And all of it can be taken by Allah. And when He takes it, it's not always because you've done something wrong. Sometimes it's because He wants to show you something greater, some deeper, something eternal. You see, one of the greatest illusions of this dunya is that it tricks the heart into thinking it is stable. It convinces you that what you have will last, that the people around you will remain, that the plans you've made will unfold exactly the way you envisioned. But Allah, in His infinite wisdom, reminds the believer gently, and sometimes abruptly, that nothing in this life was meant to last except your relationship with Him. So, when you lose something in this world, whether it's a loved one, a status, an opportunity, a dream, or your own sense of peace, it is not the end of your story. Rather, it may be the beginning of your awakening. That loss, however painful, may be the means by which Allah removes a barrier between you and Him. It may be the catalyst that detaches your heart from the world and reattaches it to the hereafter. And in that reconnection, you gain something far more valuable than what you lost. You gain nearness to Allah. You gain clarity. You gain humility. You gain freedom from the shackles of worldly dependence and find yourself anchored by divine purpose. There are people who have lost everything in this life, Yet they walk with more serenity than those who have everything, because their hearts are filled with the remembrance of Allah. They've tasted the sweetness of contentment not from material gain, but from submission to the Almighty. They've realized that the more they release their grip on this world, the more Allah fills them with what truly matters: sabr, Imaan, and a sense of peace that doesn't fluctuate with the ups and downs of life. These are the people who lose but never feel lost, because their focus is not on what left, but on who remains when Allah takes something from you. It's because He wants to give you something better, not always materially better, not always something visible, but something more beneficial for your soul. Sometimes He removes people from your life so you can stop depending on them and start depending solely on Him. Sometimes He removes a job or a path you were committed to because He knows that your heart was becoming too invested in the plan and not in the planner. Sometimes He closes the door on your dreams so that your du'as become sincere, your sujud becomes real, your patience becomes strong, and your trust in Him becomes unshakable. The things of this world are like passing clouds. You can chase them, try to hold them, plan around them, but they will always move. They will always shift. They will always escape your grasp. But what you gain with Allah is not like that. His mercy doesn't expire. His love doesn't leave. His promises do not change. His provisions are not limited. What He gives you, no one can take. And what He withholds from you, no one can force into your hands. So when you gain the pleasure of Allah, you have gained something that no loss in this world can ever outweigh. Some people lose a person they thought they couldn't live without, only to find Allah giving them a closeness to Him they never knew was possible. Some people lose their wealth only to realize how much barakah exists in simplicity and gratitude. Some people lose their reputation only to be purified from arrogance and find sincerity. In every loss, there is a mirror that Allah holds up for you, a reflection of what your soul needs. And if you choose to trust Him in that moment, if you choose to say, "Ya Allah, I don't understand why this is happening, but I know You know best," you begin to see the layers unfold. You begin to feel the burdens lift. You begin to walk lighter, not because the path changed, but because your heart did. Sometimes what you're losing is not even yours. It's an illusion of control, a temporary attachment, a test disguised as a blessing. And when Allah removes it, you feel pain. But after the pain, if you respond with patience and faith, you begin to feel purity. You begin to feel a space opening up within your soul that allows you to breathe again, to see again, to worship again with sincerity. That space is where Allah places His light. That space is where your iman begins to deepen. That space is where you gain closeness to the One who created you for something higher than mere survival. What you lose in this world might break your heart, but what you gain with Allah will build your soul. The heart may feel the grief, but the soul will feel the growth. Because there is no loss without gain when Allah is your goal. Every hardship endured for His sake is an investment. Every tear cried in His remembrance is a treasure. Every moment of letting go for His sake is a moment of drawing closer to His mercy. This is why the believer does not despair. This is why the believer remains hopeful in pain and grateful in loss. Because what you gain with Allah is never lost. Imagine a person who loses their wealth but gains humility and gives more sadaqah than they ever did before. Imagine someone who loses their health but becomes a source of light and patience for everyone around them. Imagine someone who loses their family but finds a new family in the love of believers and the companionship of angels in their dua. These are not just abstract examples. These are realities for those who choose to respond to loss with trust. These are people who have found what the world could never offer them: a soul at peace, a heart filled with remembrance, and a relationship with Allah that is not based on how much they have, but how much they believe this dunya gives and takes. But Allah only gives. Even when He takes, it is to give something greater in return. You may not see it now. You may not understand it yet. But if you anchor your heart in His words, in His promises, in His names, Ar-Rahman, Al-Hakim, Al-Latif, you will begin to see beyond the moment. You will begin to value what truly matters. You will begin to detach from what is temporary and invest in what is everlasting. And in doing so, you will realize that what you gain with Allah is not just better. It is beyond comparison. It is peace in this life and light in the next. It is reward that no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no heart has imagined. When life pushes you to the edge, when words fail, when hearts shatter, and when the weight of your burdens becomes unbearable, there exists a sacred place where healing begins, a place where dignity is not lost but restored, where strength is not shown through loud declarations but through silent submission. That place is sujud, prostration. The moment your forehead touches the ground and you surrender everything you carry, your grief, your pain, your helplessness, to the one who has always been near. It is in that moment, when the world feels furthest away, that you find yourself closest to your Creator. Sujud is not just a physical act. It is a declaration of complete dependency. It is the cry of a heart that has run out of options and finally realizes that true power lies not in standing tall before creation, but in lowering oneself before the Creator. It is in sujud that the soul finds refuge from everything it cannot explain, from every unanswered question, from every broken expectation. In that moment of stillness, beneath the weight of your tears, you discover a peace that has nothing to do with your circumstances and everything to do with your connection to Allah. When you are broken, sujud is not just a place of worship. It becomes your sanctuary. The world may never hear your cries. The people around you may never understand your silence. But Allah hears. He hears the tremble in your voice when you whisper, Ya Allah. He hears the plea that your lips don't even have the strength to articulate. He sees your tears as they fall, and He counts them. Each one is a witness that your heart still turns to Him. Even when everything else has turned away, it's in sujud that healing begins. Not always in the form of immediate solutions, but in the form of spiritual oxygen. You start to breathe again. Not because your problems have disappeared, but because your soul has finally exhaled the pain and inhaled the remembrance of the one who can carry it for you. You begin to realize that you are not alone and never were. That even when everyone else grew tired of your struggle, Allah remained close. Closer than your own heartbeat. Closer than your thoughts. Closer than your tears. The Quran mentions sujud in moments of gratitude and also in moments of fear. The prophets turned to sujud not just in joy, but when they were rejected, hurt, and overwhelmed. Sujud was their refuge, their safe haven, their fortress from the storms of the dunya. And you are being invited into that same sanctuary. You are being called not to hide your brokenness, but to bring it fully into your prayer. To lay it all down, without shame, without fear, without filters. Because Allah does not reject a heart that sincerely bows before Him. He does not ignore a servant who lowers their forehead out of desperation, trust, and love. In sujud, titles disappear. Status disappears. Everything that separates one person from another in this world dissolves, and only your soul remains. The soul of a servant standing before their king. And there is nothing more beautiful, more noble, more elevating than that moment. The world might measure strength by how much you can endure without breaking. But in the sight of Allah, true strength is how quickly you return to sujud when you do break. It's how sincerely you call upon Him, how completely you hand over your affairs, how softly you cry before the one who already knows what you need when life breaks you. It is not a sign that you are weak, it is a sign that you are human. And humans are not meant to carry everything alone. We were created to turn back, to return, to lean. And there is no leaning more beautiful than the soul that leans into sujud in its most painful hour. That moment becomes the turning point, the moment when pain turns into purpose. When fear turns into trust. When despair turns into the sweetest kind of hope. The hope that is not based on this dunya, but on the one who created it in sujud. You don't need to have perfect words. You don't need to know the most eloquent du'as. Your heart can speak through your silence. Your tears can deliver messages your tongue cannot form. Allah understands all languages. He understands the language of the broken. He understands the language of regret, of longing, of guilt, of grief. And in that quiet place between your forehead and the floor, a dialogue happens that no one else can witness. A conversation of souls. A connection that surpasses anything you will ever experience with another human being. How many times has sujud caught the tears you couldn't cry in front of anyone else? How many nights have passed where the only thing keeping you from collapsing was the dua whispered in prostration? How many storms did you survive, not because the world calmed down, but because your heart found peace in that one sacred act? Sujud is not only for the prayer mat, it becomes a way of life. A spiritual response to every wound. A remembrance that you are never helpless as long as you can bow your head before the most merciful. There are moments when life will silence you. When you feel too drained to speak, too defeated to hope, too lost to ask. But even then, if you can still lower yourself into sujud, even if just to cry without words, you are not empty. Because Allah sees that act and He knows. He knows what you left behind to turn to Him. He knows the pain you're holding while you whisper His name. He knows how hard it is for you to keep going. And He knows exactly when and how to replace that pain with something better. Some of the most powerful people are not the ones who are loud in their grief. They are the ones whose sujud in private holds the weight of mountains. They are the ones who continue to pray even when they don't see answers, because they know that being in sujud is itself an answer. It is not just a means to an end. It is the goal. To reach a place where your comfort is in your closeness to Allah, where your strength is in your surrender, where your hope is in knowing that Allah never abandons those who prostrate to Him with sincerity. Even if the world abandons them every time you make sujud, you are being reminded of where you came from, dust, and where you are returning to dust. But between those two realities, you are given the gift of prayer, the chance to bow, to remember, to reconnect, to heal. And when your body is on the ground, your soul is rising to a place where the dunya cannot reach, where the worries of the world cannot follow, where your soul whispers its most intimate truths to the one who already wrote your story before you were even born, and it is in that space that transformation begins. Not because your pain suddenly disappears, but because your heart finally surrenders it. Sujud doesn't always change the situation, but it always changes you. And that change is what gives you the ability to rise from your pain, to walk again, to hope again, to live again. Not because you are stronger, but because you are no longer carrying it alone. My beloved brothers and sisters, there will come a time in every soul's journey when this life feels like too much. When the heart is shattered into pieces so small you can hardly breathe. When you look around and see the doors closing one after another, and you begin to wonder if you've been forgotten. When the world no longer offers you comfort, and even your own strength feels like it's slipping away. But know this with absolute certainty, that moment of brokenness is not your end. It is the turning point. It is the divine call from Allah, gently bringing you back to Him. It is the invitation to rediscover where true strength lies and where peace has always been hidden in your trust in Allah. You see, the breaking of your plans is the unfolding of Allah's wisdom. The silence you hear is not abandonment. It is divine preparation. The tears you shed are not a sign of weakness. They are the purification of your soul. Every single hardship, every delay, every heartbreak is carefully measured and placed in your path by the one who knows you better than you know yourself. Not to punish you, but to realign you. Not to hurt you, but to heal you. And healing begins not when your life goes back to how it was, but when your heart turns fully to Allah. Sometimes we seek happiness in the wrong places, and so Allah removes those things from our lives. Sometimes we place our trust in people, in plans, in positions, and when they collapse, we finally realize that we were meant to rely only on Him. Sometimes we think we've lost everything, when in reality, Allah has just removed a veil from our hearts, so we can finally see the value of what we still have, Him. And when you realize that Allah is enough, even in your brokenness, you begin to feel a kind of peace that the world can never give. My dear listeners, do not be afraid of pain. Do not fear hardship. It is through hardship that Allah purifies you, elevates you, forgives you, and brings you back to your true purpose. What you lose in this world, you may never recover in form. But what you gain with Allah in the process is far greater. Your patience is written. Your tears are counted. Your du'as are being answered in ways you cannot see. And most importantly, your sujud is never wasted. That moment you fall to the ground, broken, but still whispering, Ya Allah, is the moment the heavens open in your favor. You are never alone, not even for a moment. Allah is with you through every loss, every delay, every unanswered prayer, every painful goodbye. And when life breaks you, and it will at times hold tightly to your faith, run to your prayer, raise your hands, fall into sujud. Let your heart bleed in the most sacred way possible by giving it fully to the one who created it. Because when your heart is with Allah, even your brokenness becomes beautiful. Even your silence becomes a form of worship. Even your pain becomes a ladder to Jannah. So trust Him. Trust His plan. Trust His timing. Trust that He never burdens a soul more than it can bear. Trust that your story, with all its trials, is leading you to a destination more beautiful than you can imagine. And until that day comes, walk with sabr, speak with shukr, bow in humility, and rise in hope. Because no matter what this dunya takes from you, what you gain with Allah will always be worth more than everything you've lost